All right, well, hello everybody. Good morning. Good morning here to our live audience from so many beautiful islands around the world. And hello to everyone joining from our live audience online. My name is Derek Hun-hee Kim. I am an intellectual property attorney, US licensed, working here in Seoul, South Korea. And a big part of my practice is working with music and music transactions and licensing. So it's my pleasure and honor to lead our discussion here today. This event is one of 5 live chats hosted by the World Intellectual Property Organization, an arm of the United Nations. We want to especially give thanks to the Korean Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism, and the Korean Copyright Commission for hosting this event. Well, thank you also so much for flying so far. I mean, we have people who flew more than 20 hours to get here. So I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. And before we start, I'm just going to give a little quick primer on copyright law and how does copyright law work in the music industry, specifically here in Korea. Well, Korea is a very small country that has risen from the ashes of war very quickly, and a huge part of that is intellectual property, and specifically copyright. I think behind all of our favorite K-pop stars, there's a web of copyright that protects both the creators and our favorite authors as well. So how does copyright work specifically in the music industry? Well, there are 2 types of rights with copyright that I want to point out. The first being authors' rights, and the second being the rights of performers themselves. So let's start off with authors' rights. So these are the songwriters, the composers, the people who write the lyrics and the music themselves. And copyright law states that once you write or compose a song, you automatically have copyright protection, which means that then you can license that as an artist or a performer to make money. Next, let's talk about performer rights. These are the rights of our favorite K-pop idols themselves. So even though your favorite K-pop idol or your favorite artist in your home country might not actually write the songs, they contribute their voices and they contribute many times their dance moves or choreography. So in other words, because they contributed part of themselves, copyright law states that you can then do something with them, control how your voice or your image is monetized. That's all I have to say really about copyright law, the legal jargon. One thing I will point out is with the World Intellectual Property Organization, there are certain conventions or treaties such as the Berne Convention or the Rome Convention that states that copyright that is registered in one member state must be recognized and protected in another member state. Well, that's enough of the legal jargon here for me. I want to move on now to, I think, what we've all been waiting for, our very distinguished panel here today. We have many speakers, we have artists here and leaders in the music industry. So before we start our conversation, I think we're just going to go right down the line here. And if everyone could just take a few seconds to introduce themselves, that would be great. So we'll start off with Mr. Haki Park.
Hello everyone, good to see you all. I made my first album in 1988, so I've been working as a singer-songwriter for quite a long period of time, and currently I am working at COMCA. I'm actually the vice president of COMCA. And so I'm working with protecting the rights of our musicians, and we're hoping to make a robust copyright regime around the world. My name is Haki Park. Thank you. Hello everyone. I am a singing creator. I'm also a singer. My name is Tabin Cha. So we'll be talking about a variety of different issues. I'm really looking forward to the talk. Thank you for traveling a long distance to come to Korea. Welcome to Korea. Nice to meet you all.
Hello everyone, I'm Simon Xiao. I'm the Regional Director Southeast Asia for IFPI. We are the trade body that represents the music producers worldwide.
Good morning. I'm Thomas Taillant. I'm coming from France, where the International Federation of Musicians has its headquarters. I'm Deputy General Secretary of FIM. FIM gather musicians union worldwide.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. And last but certainly not least, we also have the author of the WIPO publication, How to Make a Living from Music, Mr. David Stubbs, who's going to be joining in online. David, or do we have you here on the line?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
David, it's a pleasure. How we doing? How we doing over there in the UK?
Oh, we're fine. It's like half past midnight, you know.
Oh, midnight. Well, we will try not to keep you too late. If you could just please take a second to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, basically, I'm a failed musician. I used to play guitar, keyboards, and I was a singer, but I was not very good. So most people who go into the music business are failed musicians. So when I got there, I found there was a lot of failed musicians, and I felt completely at home. I then went into artist management. I then became a promoter in the UK, and I promoted bands like Pink Floyd, Queen, the Ramones, The Clash, Genesis, U2, and remarkable David Bowie. Last week, I'm still promoting. Last week I put on Blossoms in Manchester, and they were fantastic. But back in the 80s, I went into artist management, and managed Howard Jones, got 8 million albums with him. And these days, I manage the Thompson friend Tom Bailey, who has sold 10 million albums. Just done a mini world tour of South Africa, Dubai, and New Zealand, which was a lot of fun. I was also director of the management organisation PPL. For 10 years, as the second biggest CMO in the world representing phonogram producers. The biggest, of course, being Sound Exchange in the USA. My wife and I created the first statue of David Bowie in England in 2018. And if you're coming to England, please come to our hometown and we'd love to show it to you. As you say, I'm the author of the book How to Make a Living from Music, the 3rd edition. We published last year in 2024 by WIPO. The English version is available for free download from the WIPO website. It's also available in print. Hopefully there'll be more translations soon in Korean. But I'm very much looking forward to this podcast.
Well, thank you so much, David. You have a lot of applause coming your way here from Korea, so we hope you hear it for sure. Let's dive in now to our conversation, our main conversation. So we have a lot of friends here joining us from many copyright ecosystems around the world, which are at different levels of development. So our first topic, we're going to be talking about the transition to digital. And I think Mr. Hockey Park and Tabian will be great people to talk about this. Could you two maybe talk about the transition you've seen to the digital space? And how did that affect artists? And how did that affect production?
저는 일단 제가 말씀드렸듯이
So as I had said, I first recorded my first album back in 1988, and it was an analog era, as you know. Well, maybe not everyone, because now the younger generation may not really know. Maybe they might go to the retro styles, but at that time, anyway, the vinyl albums or the LP albums were prevalent at that time. So anyway, I had my first vinyl album back then, and everything was done analog. So we had to have a lot of equipment, a lot of people, and we had to have a studio. So in order to make an album, and even if you make a song, in order to make it commercial, you have to have a huge studio and you had huge equipment. Nowadays, you just have everything in your little computer, and so you can do everything in your room, in your computer. But back then, you had to have the studio, the equipment, and also the sound engineers, and you also had huge space. So recording an album required a lot of time and money, and you also had to have many session musicians. And for me to make a recording, you had the drummers, the guitarists, all the session musicians had to be there with me in the studio, and we had to set a time, and after the recording you have to do the mixing, and then anyway, it was really, really time consuming and it was quite costly. So maybe I do great. As a musician, I make great songs. Maybe I sing well, but you can't make an album just on your own. You have to have support and the assistance of many people around you. And debuting as a singer and making an album means that you had to be chosen by a producer, so it was not that easy. Of course, there was that kind of human touch and the retro kind of feeling, and I understand that, but times have changed. Now everything is digitalized, everything has become quite convenient. You don't need all of that big equipment, you just need a laptop. Everything is possible through virtual instruments. And before, you had to have many, many session musicians and the engineers, but then you just have to press a button nowadays. So if you have the ideas and if you know how to maneuver the computer, then you can make everything in your own room at home. So digitalization, I think, has pros and cons. The pro side is that anyone, if you just make an effort and if you have the musical senses, then you can easily create music. And the distribution of music has benefited. The LP albums back then had to be distributed manually. And maybe if you want to do well, you had to be played on radios and broadcasters. And I would actually carry the LP albums and I would distribute my albums one by one, introducing myself, and they would listen to the song, try it out. And then it took a lot of time for that to become popularized during the general public. So you don't have the social media. And so people would have to be able to share the music to spread the word of mouth about a certain singer, and maybe at least it would take 5 or 6 months for a song to be known among the general public. Nowadays, under digitalization, you make a music now and you upload it on social media, and the morning after you can become a big star. So the feedback has become so much quicker and the response is so much quicker, and of course the volume of music that's being created can also increase. So there are also the pros and cons, and I don't think I can share all of them with you due to the time constraint, but in short, anyone can easily make music at a low cost. So those are the advantages and the benefits of digitalization. But then, back then, before, in the so-called analog era, it's so it was like sewing. Your grandma would sew one by one. There was that sweat and time that was invested into her work. But nowadays, it's sort of like everything is done by machines. Everything's so much easier. So in that sense, perhaps you may feel that the aesthetic depth or the effort is not there anymore, but the volume has definitely increased. And before, you had a whole team, and the teamwork also may be beneficial, but at the same time, maybe the musician was not able to bring out his or her originality fully, but nowadays you can just work on your own. And you can go beyond the existing rules. Even if you don't know music, and if you just have a particular sense, you can articulate that into music. Maybe some people, the older generations, would say, oh, you don't even know music, and you say create music. But for the younger generation, it also means that they can bring out the originality and bring diversity to the music scenes. So there are also always the pros and cons, but as a musician, I think people people are able to express themselves through music diversely and also more.
All right, thank you, Haki. Well, it's funny because everything that Haki just talked about, from the transition from analog to digital, I think Tabin is on the tail end of that. So, Tabin, I want to ask you, as an artist who has debuted in the digital era, what was that process like, and how did you use all those digital tools that Haki talked about? Could you talk a bit about your debut process and the digital era and how it affected that?
네, 굉장히 디지털화되어 있는
Yes,
공간에
we live in a digitalized space, and I started off right in that digitalization space. Nowadays, the computer plays the drum, the AI plays the piano.
확실히 음악을 만드는데
So creating music, I think, has become a lot easier. The entry barrier is much lower, and you can create music more quickly.
대신 요즘 친구들이 더
But on the other hand, a lot of the younger musicians think a lot about musicians, because nowadays the musicians and the artists have to think about marketing themselves. They have to market and promote their music directly on their own through social media. And so in that sense, the musicians have to now think about many different aspects aside from just making music.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tabin. And along with our artists today, we also have experts from the music industry. So we'll start with Simon. Thomas, I promise I will get to you in the next question. But Simon, could you talk about working in the music industry, what changes you saw maybe from the analog to the digital era from an industry perspective?
Hi, Derek. Hi, everyone. I think what we've seen over the years really is how technology keeps on changing and how the music industry continues to learn to adapt to new technology. I think, like what Haki said, the technology is there. So one great advantage was it lowers the cost of production. A lot more people can produce their music and bring it to the market as well, because distribution channels have become flatter as well. Disadvantage, a lot more people can bring their music to the market, because now with that increase in volume, the challenge is how do you stand out? You're able to get to the market, but can you get noticed within the market itself? So I think that's where you'll find new collaborations forming, new ways of working together forming as well. And we see that constantly in this age, and change happens faster and faster. So you first see collaborations in artists within the same country. You see now collaborations very frequently with artists cross-border. And you even have production, not needing to remain in one place. You can start off in your bedroom. You can then get bigger. You can then have the opportunity to get more support from others. And that support doesn't have to be just in the studio in your country. It can come across the world as well. So that's the wonder of digitization, the wonder of technology, and we continue to be optimistic how the people, how the industry will continue to adapt and make positive use of the technology.
Thank you so much, Simon. And I love what Simon just said about, I think we need to be true to the music, but also realize that the technology, as long as we maintain our artistry, it's a tool for good, right, as long as we leverage it. Let's move on to our next topic, which is about the digital audience, right? So, maybe when Mr. Haki Park started, it was a real live audience, but now with Tabin, she's on YouTube. Her audience is mainly digital. So on that note, I actually want to ask Tabin, you debuted on YouTube, I think about 5 years ago. How did you start and how do you grow a digital audience?
네, 저는 유튜브에서
So I started singing on YouTube.
작은 무대에서 라이브를 하는
But before that, I was a singer singing on a stage. So I was a singer, I want to be a singer, but then COVID struck and my stage disappeared.
어떤 걸 할 수 있을까?
So I was thinking, what could I do?
그 잠깐의 시기 동안
And during that period,
인터넷이 나의 무대가 될 수 있겠다.
I realized that the internet could become my stage. And so I started to become really proactive, and I thought this is the only way that I can survive. So I really started to work hard on the YouTube and started to sing on YouTube.
저의 전략은
So my strategy was to sing cover songs, to make lots of cover songs,
시간을 초월
and try to go beyond the constraints of time and space and try to get to my audience,
노래를 시작하게 된
overcoming those constraints.
아무래도 전략은 메가 히트곡
So basically, I would cover the mega hits
커버해서 나의 목소리를
and then try to get my voice known. And so that has been my strategy starting from then and up until now.
Well, thank you so much, Tabin. And with that, I think with Haki, talking about the transition from analog to digital, Haki has also seen the transition, I think, in the globalization of the Korean music industry, specifically how a lot of songs are in English now. So when BTS or Blackpink comes out with a Korean album, there's almost always an accompanying English album or a Japanese album. In our live audience today, we have people who speak many different languages and many different cultures. Haki, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts about English covers, and is it necessary to have an English version of songs to attract a live audience? Because you've seen the transition from only Korean to English covers as well.
So I can't say you have to sing in English, but you can get to a lot more people by singing in English, and I think that's for sure. And the entire globe has been breaking down borders, and whether you're in the US or go to Fiji or New Zealand, before you had to communicate with them after traveling a long period of time, but now you can communicate and meet people online without running international borders, and it could be real time. So communication channels, many of them have opened up. The younger generation are much more adept at speaking in English, and so they don't really have a lot of difficulty speaking with people outside of Korea. But you know, a song is of melody and lyrics. Melody has no national borders, and you can feel something through a melody. But when it comes to lyrics, it's in a particular language, and you have to understand that particular language. Of course, you don't necessarily have to understand the lyrics. Sometimes it's better to listen to a song without understanding fully the lyrics. Nowadays, everyone wants to go worldwide. It has become the goal. So maybe singing in a language that's more widespread may benefit the results and lead to better outcome. But then I am not good at English. When I was young, I nonetheless sang a lot of Western pop songs, and I used to sing in a club. I was not a known singer. I would memorize about 300 English pop songs. I never understood what they were about. But then later, I read the lyrics and understood the lyrics, and I was a bit disappointed. When I had listened and memorized and sung a song without not really knowing what it was about, and I would imagine what the song was about, and I would be creative about it. When I read the lyrics, oh, it's not that big a deal after all. And so, yeah, I think there's lots of diversity in music. So anyway, if you are aiming for marketing, conveying in a language that can be listened to by more people.
The importance of knowing what we're singing about. All right, we have many artists here in the crowd as well, as I'm sure that can attest to that. Let's wrap up this subtopic with Thomas. So Thomas, in your career, you've also seen the transition from mainly live audiences to now digital audiences. Maybe you could speak to a word about that, and also how important is direct contact now in the digital age?
Direct contact is and has always been very, very critical, very important. In fact, it is really the core of the profession of a musician, is a contact with the audience. and you become musicians to be in contact with the audience, to play music. So it has been like this, and the digital change did not affect that spirit. However, of course, there are many changes in relation as resulting from digital change, and in the life of a musician, it is absolutely critical, especially with the development of the DIY. The DIY musician, which in fact puts a very high burden of him or herself, because you need to be a musician, you need to be a manager of your own career, you need to manage social media, you need to be very visible, and I think that's an important aspect to bear in mind. You mentioned, and you all mentioned, and rightfully, that we can see more and more songs coming up. And that's right, that's true, and everyone can release a song, even someone who is not a musician by education, because of new technology, DJs, and etc. Which means that what really makes a difference is promotion and exposure, because if you are not properly exposed to your fans, to the audience, you will never be there, even though the quality of your music is great. And this is the reason why there are a lot of aspects in relation to the music business has developed, which are very critical now.
Thank you so much, Thomas. David, we're going to get to you here in a sec, so please hang in there, because we are now moving on to our third subtopic. Now we're talking about streaming and the channels of distribution. How do we as artists get our talent out into the world, and how do we make a living from it subsequently? So David, I hope we haven't fallen asleep quite yet. Do we have you on the line? Okay, we're doing great. Well, David, you've seen this transition, and we have many people in our live audience today who are curious about streaming and channels of distribution, because it looks different in each of their countries. David, do you think that streaming is the winner in terms of making money from music? And could you also talk a bit about the distribution channels as well?
Well, streaming is most definitely the winner. There's no question. In the old days with a CD, if you bought a CD, there was only one transaction. And the record company and the industry didn't know how many times we played that CD. You might have taken it home and played it once. You might have played it 1,000 times. There was no way of knowing how many times a music fan would play it. With streaming, we know every time fans stream a track, we know about it, and money changes hands from the streaming platform to the stakeholders. And that's the great thing with streaming. You get paid every single time that a track is streamed. Many artists complain that they don't get paid enough for streaming, but the problem really was the recording contracts. Because when the transition from physical to digital happened, the record companies kept the old contract for physical. But in the digital world, there's no manufacturing costs, there's no trucks going around the country delivering CDs and vinyl, there's no faulty returns. All those overheads have disappeared from the record companies, and so you could argue that the performers should get more money through streaming. But often in recording contracts, they're still based on the old physical model. And that's why a lot of artists, particularly with old contracts, are complaining that they're not making enough money from streaming. Now, new artists who do it themselves with their own label are doing very well, because you can get to a digital distributor, like DistroKid or CD Baby, who will pay you 100% of the money. All you have to do is pay them a yearly subscription, which might be $30 or $50 or something, and they will pay all the money to you. Whereas someone with an old contract might only get 10%, unless they can renegotiate it with the record company. So that's one of the issues with artists at the moment. If you look at the digital dollar, if you dissect the digital dollar that comes in from streaming, it goes like this. The streaming service, which would be like Spotify or Melon, would take about 30%. The featured performers, that's the artists, would take about 11%. The publisher would take 4%, and the author would take 9%. The phonogram producer, that's the record company, would take 45%. And that's a big change, believe me, from the old days. And that's manifested itself in that, for example, Universal Music Group, UMG, was valued at $6.5 billion in 2013. It is now valued at $40 billion. It's like 6 times more than it was in 2013. So the money is with the record companies right now. And I'd like to see a bit of a change so that performers and authors got a bigger piece of the pie. Authors actually are getting a bigger piece of the pie. They're getting about twice as much with streaming as they did with CD. So that's good news. So the new artists with the digital distributors are doing well, authors are doing well, but the record company, the performers, the artists have suffered, certainly if they have old contracts.
Thank you so much, David. There's definitely been a change in how artists make money because of streaming. Simon, I think that's something maybe you could also speak about. How have the channels of distribution then affected artists and the rights of artists?
Hi, I'm a data nerd, so I've got numbers. I think one of the things we talked about earlier was how the move of distribution has moved really from physical to the digital. So what has happened is when it was the physical world, a lot less people could get distributed. You have to be signed, you have to have your label agree to send out your CDs and how many copies they print, for example. Whereas in the digital world, it's a lot easier for a lot of people to get out. But consequently, what you see also is that the payment comes down because it's payment per stream. Whereas in the previous time, you get a royalty cut off the CD that is put out. But how many people get the chance to put out the CD? So we have that angle. We also have the angle that as the industry adapts to the new era, you'll find that obviously contracts have to adapt over time as well. So the legacy contracts should disappear over time. The new contracts taking into account the new technologies will be there. In addition, it is also how the performers, the artists, are able to negotiate the contract. You know, as mentioned earlier, you can go DIY. The choice is there for the artist. There's so much you can choose to do on your own or get help. So it really is on the artist to think about not just how I want to create what I want to create, but how do I connect to my audience. There's so many ways now. You can get the help of distributors when you handle everything else. You can get the help of a full service label who will take care of everything and let you just concentrate on your music. Or you can take anything halfway in between also. So the idea here is there's choice, you know, and how do you decide to collaborate with who at what point in your career?
Thank you, Simon. I'd like to ask the same question to Thomas. Thomas, what changes have you seen in the transition to streaming and how that has affected the distribution channels?
So surprisingly, you won't get exactly the same answer. Well, let's go back a little bit. When in the 90s, there was a big crisis, and some analysts just predicted that the record industry might die because of piracy, which was alarming. And the development of downloading was not a satisfactory answer because the audience was not so much interested, and it didn't make money, and it was also subject to a very high level of piracy. Then there was the invention of streaming, and to be successful, the streaming model had to be cheap, very, very affordable for the audience, because it has to compete with pirate offers. And the consequence of this is that the model which was developed ended up being very, very profitable to a record company, especially major companies. But this model did not really include the remuneration of performers, except those who had a strong bargaining power and who could have a good contractual agreement with their record company. But if you look at the broad population of musicians, who are not necessarily the big stars who are not necessarily featured musicians, but you also mentioned session musicians. Those session musicians are also entitled to IP rights. And there is one thing, sorry to be long, but it's very important for the audience to understand that. According to WPPT, which is a treaty which was adopted in 1996, before the development of streaming by WIPO, there is one very important right which was created, which is the making available right. And nowadays, it is admitted, and even though we do not entirely agree with that, but it is the situation that we face, that all activity in relation to streaming refer to this making available right, which is an exclusive right that can be assigned by the performers to the producer, the record company, and of course the producer need those rights to exploit the performance under the form of a recording, but in fact, it depends very much on your bargaining power. And if you don't have any bargaining power, then your contract you get as a signed artist, or and of course as a session musician, is very, very little money. So this is a very important thing to understand, because just to give you a last figure, which is really, really telling, I think, our colleagues from the British Musician Union. The British Musician Union is the biggest European musicians union. They made a very big survey among their membership, and they have thousands and thousands of members, and some are very big musicians, those are not famous musicians. And they made a survey on the income, on their income, and the result was very, very clear. Only 5%, sorry, yes, 92% of their those who responded to the survey make their money make more than 5%. Sorry, I'm confused. Make less than 5% of their income from streaming, which means that 92% earn almost nothing from streaming. So this is the reality now.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas. And that's going to wrap up our first topic on the digital era. And one thing I've seen, and personally in my practice, is that technology will always outpace the law. Technology will always be faster developing than the law. But I think as creators and as IP professionals, we need to realize that human creativity will always remain at the center of whatever we do. And I think that can always set a standard, no matter how much we develop with technology, or as we're going to talk about artificial intelligence here in the future. Let's move on now to our second of three topics, the success of the Korean K-pop and music industry. So I'm going to talk a little about myself. So I grew up in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan, in the United States. A very small Asian population, a very small Korean population. And growing up, no one knew where Korea was. We were all Chinese for some reason. But I went back a few years ago, and it was the supermarkets, it was the fitness centers, they were all playing Korean music. And kimchi is cool all of a sudden. And I think this speaks to how it is cultural exchange and what we do as artists and creators that facilitates globalization. It's not the big hard power military, right? It's the soft power, it's the cultural exchange. Korea is a very small country. It's currently split in two, less than 50 million people. Yet just through culture, Korea has taken over the world in a sense. And I think this is something that all of us here can take with us back to our home countries, which is why I want to start off with Tabin and Haki, because they are at the center of this music industry. Let's start with Tabin. I want to ask Tabin, what do you think makes Korean music so special? Why has Korean music become a global sensation? What's the secret sauce, per se?
네, 이제는 BTS
So, BTS has become known all around the world, and I was a bit surprised too. So, people say that K-pop system runs on children being discovered at a very young age and them going through training to make them into stars. Of course, I'm a little bit skeptical because there are some ethical aspects to all this. Is it ethically correct? But there's no doubt that this kind of training system has led to the success of K-pop. There's also the marketing, and everything is now so well organized and very systematic, and I think that has led to the success of the K-pop industry.
Well, thank you, Tabin. I want to ask Haki a similar question. We have many people here in the live audience who, when you say where you're from, you might have to explain a little bit. It's the island down here, we're next to this big country. But I'm sure that cultural exchange and what we do as copyright professionals can help people realize where we are on the map. So Haki, I want to ask you the same question. What was the success? How did Korea so efficiently export its music beyond its borders compared to other countries?
I think there are various factors. First of all, Tabin had given a very good answer. All countries have their unique culture. You can't say what's right or wrong. It's sort of like trying to decide between rice and bread. It really depends on how you cook it. We all have different tastes. We all look different. We all have different cultures. And we all use different ingredients. It really depends on how you cook the food. And Korea also has a long tradition. We have kugak and many types of traditional Korean music. From my perspective, I learned music through Western pop songs. For example, I listened to Bob Dylan, Beatles, Bee Gees, ABBA, those well-known musicians, other musicians that I listened to because they were trendy and, they were cool at that time. And I would learn music through these musicians. But then I also thought, can't Korean music become better? In the past, we thought that we had to study something to do it well. From the parents' perspective, doing music or having the children doing music was not really deemed a good, prestigious career. It was, leading the road to a poorer life, according to our parents. So when I played the guitar, my parents would tell me off. How are you going to go to university if you play the guitar? They would say. But nowadays, things have become different. Everyone, but I think especially Koreans really love music in general, and so that has led to the creation of stars, and people started to have a different perception of musicians, and they did very well commercially, they became known around the world, and they had a good influence, and that led to a different perception. Of course, they were the pioneers, and so the parents' generation's perception have changed. So music is not necessarily something that has no future. If my kids like it and if they're good at it, maybe they can make a living and make a career out of music. And round about that time, round about the change of perception, the universities also went through a change. Before, only classical music was taught at colleges and universities, but round about 1980s, maybe latter 1980s, I would say maybe 1985, Department of Applied Music was established in many universities. So jazz and pop music, blues will be taught professionally. Having schools doing that makes all the difference, because in Korea the education fervor and passion is really high. Parents think that even if they have to go hungry, they would have to support their children through schooling. So going to university and studying was seen as something very essential. But if my child can't study what he or she wants to study in university, then, there will be no point in all of that. And then universities started to establish these departments of applied music, and I think that was a huge turning point in Korea. So before, if you play the guitar, you'll be told off, but after that, you'll be told off for not playing well enough on your guitar. How are you going to get into university if you play the guitar like that, they would say. So people now would be able to study music in university and think of it as a career, and they would even get the support of their parents and from society. Of course, not everyone became a star, but you are looking at the tree, but if you're looking at the tree, you also have to have the soil and the fertile soil, you have to have the sunlight, you have to have the water. And in the K-pop industry, there was a foundation that was established, and that was actually the education system. People who had majored in applied music started to graduate, and you had these talented musicians that I could never dream of, and they started to influence one another, and the overall average of quality of music rose in Korea. So this is the capacity of the individual musicians. And then round about the same time, there were some pioneers who appeared in the music industry. The main one would be the SM Entertainment. Mr. Suman Lee, he is like the pioneer. He was really progressive, and he was really ahead of his time. And he was the one who created this whole K-pop idol culture. So the younger generation's trend and styles would be manifested into these K-pop idols. And the K-pop idols would not just come out of the blue, but they have to be trained systematically in a system. And so before, in my era, okay, you're good, let's come, and then let me listen to you, okay, let's sign a contract. But then nowadays, young children would be found for their talent through auditions, and so the young children would go through a period, at least a year, maybe 5 years of training before they actually debut. They would go through the physical training, they would be trained on doing mind control, they would be trained on everything. And so the education system was set up to train these young, talented musicians. And it became more systematic over time, better organized, and then we had outcome. Then people saw the outcome and then benchmarked, and then that led to other people also joining the industry, and I think that has led us to where we are now. So in summary, the perception towards music, especially of the parents' generation, changed. they became more accommodative of their children doing music, and then there was a supportive system, and then the typically Korean educational fervor added to that, and then there was a systematic K-pop training system that was established. And Tabin also talked about the ethical side. That's true. In UK and US, I know that there are some regulations forbidding the underage students to work and train even at nighttime. But in Korea, that kind of hurdle is not really there. We're a bit more accommodative. Sometimes the children would go to boot camps and they would train 24/7. To become the idol stars in Korea. So it's a really harsh system sometimes, but they are the ones who go through that training and become the idol stars. I'm not saying all musicians go through that, but that was what led to the rise of the K-pop stars and the industry. Before, if you were just good at singing, maybe you could become a star, but the K-pop model was not just about one person singing and somebody else playing an instrument. It could be 5 members or 8 members of a group, and everyone have a particular role in the group, and that all comes together organically to lead to a good outcome. Choreography was not just about dancing to the song, and it was not just about one individual person dancing well. It had to be a whole teamwork. All the members of the team had to be good, and they would train year after year to really have that kind of team choreography, a perfectly synchronized choreography. And you would think, how do they all dance the same? You know, the BTS, when they first came out, the Koreans, we were really fascinated by the perfectly synchronized choreography that they were dancing to. And so, yeah, that was because of the education system that was established. So those factors, I think, led to the success of the K-pop. Just one more thing, one more factor, digitalization in Korea. Korea is not a big country, and not everything was developed, but internet is prevalent everywhere now. But 1980s and 1990s, I went to the US, and I went to Wall Street, and the internet was poorer than Korea. For a Korean, I was so frustrated with the American level of internet because Korean internet was so fast even back then. So I think that also played a big role in the spreading of K-pop around the world, because we talked about digitalization. From the vinyl, we had digital. Now we have social media. And under a digitalized environment, the music is being circulated very quickly. Korean K-pop also grew at the same time that the internet became more prevalent, and so it became more advantageous infrastructure-wise for Korean K-pop to do well.
Absolutely, we can give applause to that. I think Hockey was very accurate in it's not just culture, but also the education and the family's role in that has led to the Korean music industry's success. On that note, with being across the borders, I want to talk to David. I hope you're not asleep yet. I would be if I was in your shoes. David, we have you here?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you look great. David, well, you've worked with some of the top artists in the Western world. We'd like to hear your perspective on what is the secret sauce to the Korean music industry from an outsider's perspective. What do you think led to Korea being so successful in exporting and distributing its music across borders?
Well, I think you've had an extraordinary focus on video and choreography, and it's been absolutely extraordinary to see. The first time I came across K-pop was Psy and Gangnam Style, and as you probably know, Gangnam Style was the most viewed video on YouTube worldwide for about 7 years, I think, 5 years, 7 years. It was a massive cultural success, and that's certainly how I first came across it. And I think he was the one that really pioneered it for Korea, and then there was so much talent coming behind him, as you say, BTS and Blackpink and everyone else. The other thing I think Korea has been very good at is collaboration. You know, BTS have collaborated with Coldplay, Nicki Minaj, Charlie XCX, Lil Nas X. It's a whole list of people they've collaborated with. And the great thing about collaboration is that it doubles the fan base, because your fan base follows the other artist's fan base and the other way around. So you can double your fan base if you do a collaboration. Excuse me. Basically, I mean, with Psy, I mean, Barack Obama said it was an example of how people around the world are being swept up by the Korean wave of culture. And Ban Ki-moon from the United Nations said Gangnam Style was a force for world peace. So that's pretty amazing praise, isn't it, really, from two of the top people in the world at the time. And I think you've done an incredible job as an example to the world, because often it hasn't been in English, and yet that didn't matter, you know. It just didn't matter. It was fantastic music and fantastic videos. And, you know, I think it's just an example to the world, and I think you could teach us a lot.
Thank you so much, David. I also think it's so cool how all of a sudden people want to speak Korean. That was not a thing for me growing up. So I think it shows how there's truth to what was said, that they say that where words stop, music speaks, correct? And where cultural exchange plays a big role in that, and how that has been key to the Korean music industry's success. We are now going to move on to our third and final topic, a bit more technical, but I think it will also be very useful to everyone here in our live audience as well as online, and that is CMOs, or collective management organizations. David, I'm going to bring it back to you here. David, could you briefly speak to what CMOs are and what they do? Because we have many people here, our friends in the live audience, where in their home countries, there might not be a ton of CMOs. So could you just talk about the basics of CMOs and what they do and why they are needed?
Okay, well, I think the important thing is to understand with the music industry is that there's two parts to it. There's the author's rights and the publisher's rights on one side, and then there's the recordings, record companies and performers on the other. I like to think of it as two rails of a railway track. So on the left rail, you've got authors, that's songwriters, composers, and publishers who exploit their works. And on the right-hand side, you have performers and record companies who are on the other side. They both have different rules. Authors' rights have been around a lot longer than performers' rights, because the gramophone was only invented in 1897. Before that, a performer was in complete control of their rights. They either turned up to the show and played, or they didn't. It was as simple as that. But as soon as you could get recorded music, then that created another whole load of rights, which is still developing. So if you wanted to, you know, if you've got copyright in what you've done, and every time a user wanted to use it, they had to phone you up and say, can we use your music, or can you send us a license to this music? That's totally impractical. So what collective management do is they do that for you, and they basically license users. So anyone who wants to play music or use your music needs to get a license. Music has a value, and it's very, very important whenever it's used, if it's played on the radio, on a television station, if it's played live, if it's played in a hairdresser's or a sports stadium, it has to be paid for. And that's where collective management comes in. The users that a collective management organization will license include shops, clubs, workplaces, stadiums, digital platforms, of course, the streaming and downloads. So wherever, like I say, wherever music is used, it has to be paid for. They then, after they've licensed the users, they will process the data of what they've used, what music they've used, and they will pass the money on to the rights holders after removing their administration costs. And when it comes to an international collection, CMOs have reciprocal agreements with other CMOs all around the world. So if a Korean track is played in the UK, the CMO in the UK, PRS, will pay Komka, Komka, in Korea for that use. The other way around, if a Korean, if a English track is played in Korea, then Komka will pay PRS for that play. So it's a reciprocal agreement, and it works on both sides of the tracks. It works for authors and it works for performers. Now, in Korea, you've got the authors' organization Komka, and the performers' organization is FKMP, and the record company's collective management organization is called KEPA, K-E-P-A. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Now, if a young artist has got their own record label, they write their own songs and they perform on their records, they would need to join all three of those CMOs, because they would be authors because they're writing the music, they'd be performers because they're making records, and if they've got their own label, they would also be the record company, in which case they would need to join KEPA. So that's something you need to bear in mind, and every artist needs to make sure that they're getting on the end of all the income streams, and particularly with collective management. When it comes to digital, there can be several intermediaries in the chain before money reaches the author from the original use. And so some performers, some publishers are actually licensing digital platforms directly and bypassing the collective management organizations. That's happening quite a lot, and especially with hubs like ICE and Harmonia. Similarly, on the recording side, record companies license the digital platforms directly. And that's because of the making available right, which Thomas mentioned. The making available right says that if a fan accesses a piece of music at a time and a place of their own choosing, then the making available right applies. And that's why record companies license digital platforms directly and don't involve the CMO. So that's basically what collective management is all about. It's very important as income streams for performers and authors, and you know, it's still developing around the world, and hopefully it will get more efficient, and data will become more easy to organize.
Thank you so much, David. Before we hear from Haki and Dabin about the CMO that they're in, we'd also love to hear from Thomas and maybe Simon as well. Thomas, let me start with you. What happens to authors and performers' rights when they join a CMO? And keeping in mind that we have many friends in our live audience with different amounts of CMOs in their home countries, maybe also speak to why CMOs are important.
Yes, well, as David mentioned, the CMO will license rights that can be licensed for either performers or producers or authors, in the wrong order. You may have one CMO collecting for all category of stakeholders in some countries. In other countries, you may have one joint collecting society for producers and performers. And in other countries, you may have one collecting society per category of right holders. just to set the scene. It is very, very important, in fact, from the performance point of view, to join a CMO for a few reasons. First of all, a CMO is a democratic body. You need to understand that in European countries, most, if not all, CMOs for performers were created by at the initiative of a musicians union, and because this is you will not have more right because you are big. You will get the money you are supposed to get according to the expectation of your performances. So it is important things to say. And secondly, CMO, you have, as a member, you have a right to vote. So you can elect the member of the board, and you can also be eligible to some support for artistic projects, which can be very important, whether recordings or live performance. I'd like just to add that CMOs are also exposed to some critics. Or some undermining. For instance, if I can just give an example, the Swedish company Epidemic Sound, which is very famous to distribute recordings for ads in particular and for video. They clearly state that you cannot access the service if you are a member of a CMO or a union, by the way. So it's quite a tough situation. And last but not least, and I think it's an important thing to consider. As David mentioned, CMOs will collect money that cannot be collected individually by musicians. That's for sure. And nowadays, in most of the countries I know, as far as performers, only performers CMOs are concerned, 90% plus of collection comes from a right that cannot be assigned to the record company, and namely public performance and blank tape levy. So this is also an important aspect to keep in mind.
Thank you, Thomas. We definitely want to hear from both Haki and Tabin, but Simon, I also want to give you maybe a quick chance to speak on CMOs and their role and their importance.
Sure, thanks. As our two colleagues mentioned earlier, it's really critical because it allows the artists to be able to reach and monetize in these small value but voluminous transactions when businesses in particular play your music. So what happens here, just a small statistic from the recording industry side, 10% of the global market for recorded music is from the public performance side. So without signing up to a CMO, without the efficient collection and distribution from the CMO, labels, producers, and their contracted artists are simply leaving this 10% on the table. And the important thing here, as was alluded to earlier, is how do we continue to educate, make aware so artists sign up with the CMOs, and secondly, how do we continue to improve the CMO operations? And that's important, not just from a operational perspective, but also from a government perspective. How can the government support this way for the artists to monetize their works? And an issue here, of course, is while many governments feel the need to supervise, understandably so, supervise CMOs, from a regulatory perspective, you look at governance, you look at transparency, you look at how they collect and they distribute the income properly. But there are times when over-governance can also affect CMO operations. So while we're looking at an average of 10% market share across the world, there will be countries with efficient and effective CMOs collecting 15% of market share is the public performance or even more. And there are countries which do face challenges. Example, even in Korea with such an advanced music industry, the market share for public performance rights collection is about 2.5%, which is 1/4 of the global average. So we do see how it can improve, and as international trade bodies and federations, we also have, fortunately, the expertise and the experience across the globe to bring to the individual countries that are facing challenges. Now, what are the global benchmarks? What are the global good practices that can be put in place in all the different countries?
Thank you, Simon. It's always great to welcome a data nerd to the music industry. So thank you so much for your insight. Let's ask our local experts, our local artists. I'm going to start off with Tabin. Tabin, you are a part, along with Haki, of Kamka, Korea's largest CMO. Can you talk about your experience working with the CMO as an artist, and why do you find them important?
네, 이런 음저협 같은 곳에 가입을
Yes.
해야 되는 이유는
The reason why I have to become a member of a CMO, as the experts had mentioned, is
한국에 있는
there. It's quite evident, and you've already mentioned it. In Korea, you have the Performance Association and CMOs like Komka in Korea to protect the rights.
행사도 함께 하고 있고
So, as a member of Komka, I have participated in various different events held by Komka. So, for example, there was a song camp held by Komka. So, it was a workshop for us to train in songwriting, and so it was really interesting and fun and
굉장히
beneficial.
설명해 주시는 거 아직도
It's really difficult. I listened to the explanation by some of the experts, and I'm not sure if I understood everything because it's quite complicated, but I need to listen to the explanations more for me to be able to better protect that right, my rights.
권리를 가지고 있는 음악가라는 생각을
But then when I listen to all that, I realize I do
Thank
indeed
you so
have
much,
rights.
Tabin. And let's now hear from Haki Park, who is the vice chairman of Kamka, Korea's largest CMO. Haki, can you talk about the role of the CMO and what your experience has been with Kamka, keeping in mind that we want to encourage everyone here in the live audience to participate in CMOs?
네, 저는 한국음악저작권협회.
So I am a vice president of Komka, and I am now have been in office for about a little bit more than 3 years now.
지금 한 60년 정도.
So Komka has been around for about 60 years.
지금 저작권협회가 CM으로서 역할을 하고.
Komka is a CMO in the music industry, and it's contributing to the music industry because
쉽게 말하면 그때는 그냥 이게 발이 푹푹 빠지는 진흙 같은.
well, back in the past, when we were just starting out, things were difficult. Nobody knew about copyright. Nobody understood copyright. Musicians, music has nothing to do with rights, people thought. But then there were some musicians struggled through the muddy field back then. Nobody helped them. But now, because they had struggled so much in the past, we are better protecting our rights and doing music more comfortably. Now Komka has grown, and that was due to the 60 years ago some of our pioneers really paved the way for CMO.
저희는 약 200여 명의 직원들이.
So we have about 200 people working in Komka, and the entire leadership is composed of authors and composers, the president, myself, and everyone in the leadership are composers, and also some are performers and authors. And so we are working hard to ensure the rights of everyone, all the musicians. So the explanation about the rights have already been given by the experts. Tabin was able able to become popular around the world in a very short period of time, but it's impossible for Dabin to know everything about where her music is being played. So there's a music that I had made, and it's difficult for me to know, how many times it was played in Costco and how many times it was played in another supermarket, etc. So in short, a CMO's role is important in the sense that it collects and distributes the royalties. The reasonable and adequate amount of royalty is collected and transparently distributed, and I think that's the basic feature and function of a CMO, but there's more to it. The CMO has to be able to protect the musicians and be the basis for them to grow further. We've been to India, Taiwan, and in SACEM also. We had a meeting with SACEM a little bit while back, and we have also met the CMOs and exchanges with CMOs of other countries. So it's a role and responsibility of a CMO, but at the same time, it's giving an opportunity to musicians. It's allowing the musicians to be able to exchange and share their music, going beyond the political borders and to show the power of music. So I think that's another obligation and duty of a CMO. So in that sense, we have a lot of plans. So first of all, we have to protect the creators and the artists and the rights. Yes, today, I think maybe, I'm not sure if we have time to discuss the issue of buyout contracts, which are problematic everywhere. Musicians make a music, but then all the rights are assigned. It's taken away from them all at once. And I think the weaker the copyright law, the more they are in cases of buyout contracts, and we still have that kind of practice in Korea. That's if the musicians are in a weak situation. The stronger people with enough power will be able to protect their rights, whatever, but the weaker side have to have the law on their side. So I think doing music is sort of like planting a tree. You have Dabin here, you have a Dabin, a very well-grown tree, a well-growing tree. And say Dabin is an apple tree. We want to buy the apples, pick the apples from the tree, but then somebody would want to take the tree and steal the tree, and that musician won't be able to do anything afterwards. So that is a very important aspect of copyright, and there are many cases where that kind of right is not respected. In many different countries, we all have different laws, but we also have a common understanding, and we have to be able to share that common understanding. All musicians around the world and also CMOs around the world have to really do something about these buyout contracts. We really have to discuss the issue and we have to get rid of it. It's really about cutting a well-growing tree. You may be able to pick the fruits from the tree, but you should not be cutting down the tree and stealing it. So we have to change the draconian provisions in the law, and so I think that is the role of a CMO.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Haki. We are now going to move on to our second of three subtopics, talking about the importance of contracts as musicians and copyright professionals. Thomas, let me start off with you, talking about collaborations and synchronizations, the need for legal advice and contracts, and what are the key terms or the key clauses you think musicians need to keep in mind when working with contracts?
Well, this is a very important aspect of the business, because all the rights are either transferred or licensed through a contractual arrangement. And as Aki said, now the situation is very problematic because you have more and more buyout contracts. And the problem is that if you can you can look the situation every angle you want. If you are not in a strong bargaining position, you can't negotiate properly the various provisions that are very important. So I will not now go too much into details because we don't have time to address this in detail. But the message that I would like to give is that this is critical. Nowadays, it's true that you can get some support, and if you are a strong artist, you can get some support from a manager, and a good manager can make a big difference because you already have a good bargaining position. You can get some support from a lawyer, and if you are small, you can also expect some support from unions, for instance. But the thing is that the market is the market, and if everything is under the ends of the contract, and especially the fact that because of contract, you will be asked to assign all your exclusive rights to your contractor, which is not necessarily a producer, and I'd like just also to emphasize this. You may have developed your own recording, and you can be the self producer of your own recording. So in that case, you will sign or what is supposed to be a license agreement with, for example, with the distributor. But you have more and more situations whereby the distributor will in fact impose rules that are very unfair because he is in a very strong position. And what we see now is that more and more self-producer have to assign the master of their recording, the master of their recording, which means in fact that the property of your IP rights. So it is also clear that in that case, if you don't have the bargaining power, there's nothing you can do. Otherwise, you just do something else. But if you want to stay in the business, it's just a take it or leave it situation. This is, in fact, yes. Contractual issues are very, very critical, and you need, as a musician, you need strong support by professionals, for sure. But a good manager will not transform stone into gold, and it is what it is, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Simon, I also want to give you a quick chance to speak also about the importance of contracts. Perhaps you could speak about licensing, because licensing is a big way of how musicians make money. You create a work, and then you license it to a publisher or an entertainment company, and then you receive money from that. So, Thomas, could you speak about the importance of contracts and licensing?
Hi. As was mentioned earlier, CMOs, that's one way already in which you have somebody ensure that there is licensing of your work done at high volume. There are other opportunities that have opened up, of course, with the democratization of distribution, with the availability of the internet. So the options here, of course, do you do it yourself? Do you get support to get it done? And who has that network that you can leverage on to help you? You have licensing opportunities, not just of your music, but of yourself also, because it is an entire package, right? So on this water bottle, what do we see, right? We already have endorsements, licensing opportunities there. Your music has licensing opportunities in terms of not just collaboration, but sync licenses into videos, into movies. You have the ability to also opportunity to endorse advertisements, music in your advertisements, music even possibly in some publicity or promotional activities that some businesses may have, whether online or offline. It could be malls, it could be a shop opening, you know, they have guest appearances. So there are a lot of opportunities. It's how you view, how you spot them, and how you get help to leverage them. You also have to realize that we are way beyond the days and age where CDs are sold, you get a cut of the CD, and you literally sit back and that's it. Now, there's a lot more engagement with your audience, with your customers, with your fans, and it is the responsibility of the artist to decide how much they want to do, what they want to do to touch the lives out there. And briefly on contracts also, it's been said about bargaining power, but that is the reality of business. If you go for support, the people who invest financially and in their networks in the artists will naturally look for returns on their investment. So know your options, choose your options wisely, because the options have the consequences, have the effects as well. If you are not happy with the terms of the contract, is it something that you can perhaps shorten the tenure or the period of the contract? And when you have more bargaining power in future, when you are more famous, then you renegotiate or you enter into other contracts. Look into how the big artists have done it in the past. They may have had unfavorable terms, but as they grew in stature, they also had the ability to renegotiate. Do you want that sort of progression, or do you prefer to have, do it yourself all the way, which is possible, and you own all the IP rights, and the options are there. It's a question of, like Thomas said, get good advice, understand your options, and understand what happens when you choose those options.
Well, thank you so much, Simon. That's going to conclude our third and final topic on CMOs. We're now going to quickly talk about our concluding topic, which is the future challenges and opportunities, namely artificial intelligence. I would like to hear from maybe an artist's perspective. Let me start by asking Tabin very quickly. Tabin, how do you see artificial intelligence being used by creators and musicians?
So AI plays the piano for you, can play the drums for you. So we're living in a fascinating era. A friend gets an idea about a lyrics from ChatGPT. So maybe we can think about some of the advantages of AI, but at the same time, when I was watching a YouTube, I realized that AI-generated music was being used very much. Then I realized that AI could actually threaten musicians. I thought it was some kind of a sci-fi topic, but I'm not sure of the exact amount. But even with a small amount of money, you can actually create quite a high quality music nowadays using artificial intelligence. And then I realized that it can indeed become a threat to musicians.
Thank you, Tabin. Let's also hear from David in the UK. David, artificial intelligence to creators. Is artificial intelligence a friend or a foe? What should we keep in mind as copyright and musicians with AI?
Well, it's obviously both. AI has been developing for 70 years with robotic and AI-assisted processes, but it's only recently has it got sophisticated enough to cause concern with music. The warning bells went off in April 2023 when an artist called Ghostwriter 977 released a track called Heart of My Sleeve by Drake featuring The Weeknd. It sounded totally authentic. The voices sounded totally correct. And he put it out on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, SoundCloud, etc. And then on the 15th of April, just a couple of weeks later, he released a 1 minute snippet on TikTok, which got 15 million views within a few days. UMG, who is a record company for both Drake and The Weeknd, then took it down, asked all the platforms to take it down. Neither Drake or The Weeknd knew anything about this track. They'd never heard it before, but it sounded just like them, and it was totally convincing for a fan. So that was really the warning bells that, we had to really be careful about all this. I mean, AI is creating a sort of digital artificial neural network. Music's always been heavily influenced by technology, and AI is going to be no different. If you take the 78 record in the early 20th century, it went 78 revs per minute. On shellac discs, it had 5 minutes of music on each side, so that was 10 minutes. Then we go on to the vinyl album at 33 and a third revolutions per minute. It had 22 minutes per side, which is a total of 44 minutes. The CD had 79 minutes of music on one disc. And of course, streams are totally unlimited. So that gives you an example of how sound carriers have developed. And we'll see how that goes with AI. Now, there are 4 types of AI tools. The first one is AI tools that assist humans in music making process, and they're very useful in the recording studio and elsewhere. The second one is AI that generates music by stitching together pre-existing musical segments or stems based on the criteria set by the user. That's definitely another one that's happening at the moment. The third one is AI that assists humans to generate tracks that imitate the style, sound, or voice of a specific artist, which is what the Ghost Rider did with Drake and The Weeknd. It's important to remember that copyright cannot be granted if it's fully generated by AI. But if there's a human involved in that process, then the human being can claim the copyright. The controversy is how they trained these AI models. Some trained them using commissioned music, which is very legal. They commissioned music to train the models. The second one is through production music or library music, which is music created mostly for film use, which again is possibly legal. The third option is that they trained it with commercially released music, and that's the controversy, the third one there. The music industry is strongly saying that if models are trained using commercially released music, then that has to be paid for because it's copyright protected, and that they need the permission from the copyright owner. And authors and performers are saying that in addition to the copyright owners giving permission, the authors and performers must also give permission if it's going to be used for AI purposes. The tech companies say that it falls under the copyright exception of fair use. In other words, you don't need to get copyright permission because it's just fair use. They're just using it to train their model. And governments are considering this all over the world at the moment, this dilemma as to how to treat this. Where the music industry is hoping that they'll say that it's not fair use, obviously, and that they have to get permission from copyright owners if they can use those recordings to train their AI model. With the American government regime at the moment, who are very pro-AI, it's worrying as to which way it's going to go in the USA. But we'll just have to wait and see. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Thank you so much, David. We're going to wrap up this session, actually. I also want to ask Haki very quickly, because he's been both an artist and now working as a vice chairman. What are your thoughts on artificial intelligence? Is AI a friend or a foe to music creators?
Yeah, so I don't want to take too long a time, but it is a very sensitive topic that does require a long discussion. So friend or foe, I think it can be both. So, it's a double-edged sword. At times, you can use a knife to make food, but sometimes you can also use a knife to kill somebody. So it really depends on how you use the knife. Thank you for your reaction. So it really depends on how you use it and how you regulate it. And that's all on us as well. It's a big challenge for us in the music industry. Nowadays, everywhere, people are using artificial intelligence. It can be something fun and interesting, but then it could also be quite threatening. Yeah, people talk about the TDM exception and adopting it in law, and there are many differing opinions in all different countries. In order to benefit the humanity, some people say that we do have to accept TDM exceptions, according to some. But then there are also many sectors who are sacrificed as a result of the TDM exception. One of them is music. I am fascinated by AI. I talked with Tabin about AI. And, we were laughing and really fascinated about some of the music that we encountered. AI can just make a music in a couple of minutes by pressing some buttons. If you just put in the right prompts, you can generate music. Can we call the prompter a musician? It's really difficult to say. So technology can benefit humanity, according to some people, and I hear this a lot. Yes, indeed, technology has benefited humanity, but it can also threaten humanity. And I think when facing AI, it was the first time that I realized that it can indeed be a threat. So let me use an analogy. Humans have emotions, and of course, words, you can express our emotions, but there are something, that feeling or emotions that cannot be expressed in words, and we express that through music. When making music, if that humane touch and the humane feelings and emotions are excluded, then what's remaining? Say somebody is running, and before people ran barefooted, but then people started to wear shoes, and then Nike came up with these air cushioned shoes that makes you run faster, and so you have all these technology coming out, and the outcome is improved, so they run faster, and maybe it also benefits the athlete. It makes them healthier, it protects the knees. But then the new shoes came out, and if you wear those shoes, you fly. And maybe you'll be able to fly really quickly, but then what can happen? We won't use our muscles. As soon as we take off those shoes, maybe we'll just become useless and we'll just flop down. So I think that is the other side of AI. There is a Fijian woman that I fell in love with, and maybe I'm writing a love letter. Maybe I'll think of it all night. What am I going to write? What expressions are most appropriate? Now you don't have to do that. You just have to say or prompt ChatGPT, okay, I am in love with a Fijian woman, so what should I write in her love letter? And the ChatGPT will write you a love letter. So this is the era that we live in. Is technology benefiting humanity? So nowadays, it's a transition, so everything is all mixed up, and so maybe the threat is not there as much, but then after a while, we might not have to bother making music at all. Is music going to continue to improve thanks to AI? I'm not sure. AI does not make music out of nothing. Nothing can replace the human touch or the human sentiments. We believe, or we want to believe, that maybe AI can do it, but it can't. Up until now, millions of musicians have created works, Beatles, John Lennon, and Pakaki, myself. We musicians have created all these works, and AI just so easily scraped it together, collected it, and just edited it to create a work. It's not representing the human emotions, but we believe, or some people believe, that AI can do everything for us. Maybe one day there will be no musicians left on earth. It will just be a good prompter. And if AI no longer ceases to exist, it would be like taking off those shoes and humans wouldn't be able to do anything. we won't be able to express our love, we won't be able to have music in our lives. So AI can be a benefit, but it can also be a great threat. And so we need a very wise response. We're at a crossroad in that sense.
Well, I think that is a great way for us to start wrapping up and going out. And we're just going to wrap up very quickly. Everyone's just going to say a quick conclusory remark. Keep it very quick. Let's start off with David. Keep in mind that David is the author of the WIPO publication, How to Make a Living from Music. It's available on the WIPO website for free. That's a great resource. So David, could you just give us a quick conclusory remark, and we'll send you off to bed.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been great. The only thing I would like to say, I said before, is that music has a value. And you always have to remember that music has a value, and it always needs to be paid for if it's being used. So that's something you always have to keep in mind. I'd also say that, in the first 14 years of this century, the music industry was in decline, in sharp decline, and Napster came along in 1999, and the record companies closed it down in 2001. They shouldn't have closed it down. They should have embraced it and developed it. But what it did, it sent the piracy underground, and all these pirate platforms turned up, which led to 14 years of decline. And then in 2015, we hit a tipping point, and ever since then, it's been booming again, which is fantastic. But you have to understand the history. That said, the piracy is still about 30% in the world. So that means 30% of the music in the world is not being paid for and being used illegally. So that is a constant thing that we have to keep our eye on, and I know people like IFP are doing a great job in introducing anti-piracy measures. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, David. We'll send you off to your bedtime here. So we'll just go right down the line here. Keep it very quick. Thomas, can you give a conclusion?
I try to be brief, but I'd like to say something on AI. Well, my general conclusion is that this industry is what it is, but we need more fairness, and we need everyone to be fairly remunerated out of this. And what is going on now with a TDM exception in relation to AI is really outrageous. In fact, it is somehow the dilution of copyright spirit. Why am I saying that? Because we are now in a situation where a machine has the right to train and to use every possible protected content to train, and then to deliver a result that will be used, and of course it looks fantastic, but behind this result you have the work of people, and you have the performance of musicians, and those are simply overlooked. And we have a very serious concern in relation to the copyright itself, because when you realize that with the TDM exception, no one at the moment is really able to enforce it. So that's one alarming thing. And second, if stakeholders end up finding a solution on a format that can enable them to opt out, it means that they have to take the burden of this, and it is can be very expensive, and those who are simply using for free the protected content, they have nothing to do, and they have nothing to pay. So we have to be very cautious with the narratives from tech companies who keep saying, talking about innovation, talking about competitiveness, just to fight against any kind of regulation, and those regulations are the basis of copyright. So what is true with a streaming situation is also true with AI, and we need to be extremely cautious, because you can say whatever you want, but I don't see any justification for tech companies which is more powerful than most of countries on this earth, just to refuse to pay the copyright, because they need they use this copyrighted content for their business. It's just unjustifiable.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas. Simon, your last remarks, please.
Thanks, Derek. I'll make two brief points on piracy, which Thomas brought up, as well as on AI. For piracy, as you know, you have ways to distribute your content now. So do the pirates. And one of the common issues we face around the world is stream ripping, where people rip streams into download files, and once they do that, you lose all your pay-per-stream revenue. So this is something that governments have to be aware of and be able to take quick and effective action against stream rippers, not just what is traditionally just the pirate, but all the way through that chain of supply as well, whether all the intermediaries, whether is it the ISPs, whether is it the domain registers, and so on. So that remains a big problem because it's so easy to get pirated work now. AI, very basic principles. Stay away from the legal jargon and all. The question is, the law needs to be fair. That's all. So how is it fair for work to be taken without permission and then used as training data to create output that immediately competes with the work that it has taken in, and you don't get remunerated for it? So that, I think, on the first principles basis is not fair. So how do we maintain and get that balance? The current copyright laws without the TDM exception requires permission, requires you to consent and get remunerated for it. So that should be the way it goes, because as David said, music has value. It should be remunerated for its value in the way it's used.
Thank you so much, Simon. Tabin, your last remarks, please.
So we dealt with a variety of different issues today, and it was really fun to be a part of this talk. So I'm just starting out, and I'm a musician, a full-time video creator, and I am trying to create various content, and I want to continue to do that. So I hope that the different laws and regulations will be improved, and it was really good to see you all.
Well, thank you so much, Tabin. Yes, we can give applause. Please follow Tabin Cha on all the social media platforms, please, YouTube, Instagram, etc. Haki, please give your last remarks, please.
So we talked about the K-pop and idol system. There are many contracts being signed, and there are a lot of debate around the contracts in Korea. So nowadays, people talk about artists' standardized contracts. So maybe all the different terms and conditions are different, but there are some conditions that have to be abided by in all of the different contracts. So we have talked about a variety of different issues today, and they're all very much important issues in the music industry. And CSAC is an international organization of the music-related CMOs, so perhaps they can also play a role in responding to AI and also buyouts, and hopefully we'll be able to see more of a standardized contracts. Of course, there are some uniqueness to different jurisdictions, but the basic provisions or the backbone should be in the standardized contract, and we hope to see more of that going forward. I had heard from many experts, very helpful, and it was really good to see you all, and hopefully maybe next time I can bring my guitar and play for you.
Well, thank you, Hockey. Please find Mr. Hockey Park on all your favorite social media platforms as well. That concludes the main session, and we now have time for some questions, not just from our live audience, but also our audience online. For our live audience, so on the side closest to me here, so Bhutan on my left and Samoa on my right, there's a microphone. We're just going to go down the line if anyone has a question. So we're going to start on my right side here. If anyone on my right side has a question, I'm going to pass down the mic. Just let us know your question and who it is directed to. So are there any questions on my right-hand side? No. Oh, we have one. Okay. It's Barbados. Here we go. The land of Rihanna. Yeah.
Thank you very much to the esteemed panelists for what has been a very insightful and fruitful conversation this morning. I wanted to highlight the points which were made on the importance of capitalizing on internet and utilizing the technology in promotion. But to look at it from the perspective of a challenge which is not necessarily unique to Barbados, and that is being geo-blocked as a region. So we have a hurdle to cross as it relates to being able to have our artists profit from putting their works out on the internet through internet and streaming and so forth, because we are generally geo-blocked as a region. Are there any solutions that we can look into as it relates to helping our artists monetize their works in this digital era?
Anyone on our panel would like to answer the question? Go ahead, Thomas. Yes.
I could try, at least. I will not provide you a complete answer. I think the question of monetization is very directly linked to the ability to enter the global market. That's very true. And unfortunately, in countries that are not rich enough to compete in the global market, artists and successful artists or prominent artists have to move the country, which is very, very sad. But I'd like just to draw your attention on one example. I had a meeting with a very, very famous artist in Kenya. And there was no geo-blocking in Kenya, and we talk about his situation and the money he could make out of streaming. Very famous local artist, and everybody knows him in Kenya, but he's not famous internationally. He said that you have no idea how little money I can make. So I think it's also important not to have too many expectations because of the way the streaming market is organized is not very conducive to the majority of artists. And it is a fact, unfortunately.
All right. We have any other questions on my right-hand side?
Thank you very much for this session. It's been so wonderful. We are just enjoying it. Thank you. My question is for Haki. As an artist, musician, and I understand you had one of your CMOs here in Korea. Has there been any cases of infringement on behalf of users and copyright owner of music? Has there been a high-profile infringement, like they've been taken to court for you using without permission a song of a composer that you know of from the top of your head?
So I don't remember every single case, but probably there were quite a lot of such cases. And in Korea, we had this system called 소리바다. So it was a P2P service, and people would just use music for free. And so people had no idea
어려운 벽이었습니다.
about streaming or having to pay for music.
누구나 공짜로 쓰고 있다.
Everyone's using it for free.
모두가 쓰고 있다.
If everyone's using it for free, why feel guilty about it? People thought.
왜 그걸 돈 주고?
Why would we have to pay for music when we can listen for free? And that's period was very difficult for us as musicians, and it continued for quite a long time. But then Comca and other CMOs responded to the situation, and it became a social issue, and we raised the discourse. But it was not just about money. It was a matter of changing the perception of the general public. So we needed to raise awareness. And we had to get celebrities who had a great influence or politicians on our side, and they had to continue to raise awareness and do campaigns. Of course, there are individuals who are infringing copyright, but I mean, those are being responded to effectively. But in Korea, there was that 소리바다 example, the free download service, but you know, that situation has resolved now.
Okay, well, thank you to everyone on my right-hand side. Please feel free after to come up and ask questions, but in the interest of time, we're also going to ask for questions maybe on my left-hand side. If you have a question, just please raise your hand, and please say who the question is directed to. So, Bhutan, yes.
Because in my country, we've had a lot of cases, because he didn't touch on it. That's why I wanted to ask, just to highlight.
Hold on just 1 second. I think we need the mic here. All right, the mic is coming. Please just wait a second.
Hello. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, Moderator Derek, for your very lively moderation, and the panelists on site and online for your very insightful talk on the contemporary issues of IP in the music industry. I come from Copyright and Creative Industry Promotion Office in Bhutan. So I have a question on first three topics. It revolves around the first three topics. With the advancement in technology, especially the digital technology for online sale and enforcement and other distribution, and simultaneous refinement of our copyright laws, I have the feeling that the works of CMO could become redundant, especially if the record companies or individuals, they prefer to sell or put directly in the digital platform. So my question would be directed to Simon and Thomas, both of you could answer. What is the relevance of CMO in the next 10 years if the digital technology keeps evolving and refining? Thank you.
Okay, just a quick response here. As long as you have brick and mortar shops, as long as you have hotels, as long as you have restaurants and cafes, you will need CMOs, because the artists cannot go around to every single one of them to collect. So the CMOs will continue to be there because brick and mortar is there.
If I echo what you said, I fully agree with you. You need also to realize that the vast majority of performers do not get money from record companies. When you assign your rights, you have those featured artists who have royalties on the exclusive rights, and those who have just assigned the right against one fee for the record session and for the transfer of all their exclusive rights. And this is what Simon said. So this money, in fact, is what they can get from IP rights. So the only case where we could imagine in the future where CMOs would not be necessary anymore is with a massive development of blockchain technology, for instance, where anyone could get directly the money he might expect from the blockchain. But we are very far from this, and as I said before, CMOs are also very useful for many other issues. Those are the house of creators, and it is important, and producers as well, and this is important to keep that in mind.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Do we have another question from Bhutan? Oh, well, just 1 second. Sri Lanka, we'll get to you here in a second, I promise.
Hi, thank you. My question is for her.
For Tabin?
I just want to ask, what would you advise, Bhutanese content creators, what would you advise them to reach your level someday? Because, just a second, sorry. Because Bhutan might be very small and we have population not even more than 1 million. But we have good content creators. We have so many singers that has reached millions of views on TikTok or YouTube. But I just wanted to ask you how to reach your level someday, to inspire them maybe, give some advice. Thank you.
First of all, it's an honor for me to be able to hear that. I do get that question because I do record quite a high view, but I usually say the same thing. I'm a very ordinary person, and for a long period of time I wanted to communicate with my audience, and so every day I created videos. Per week I would upload something 5 days. And I know that there are many talented people in Bhutan, and if they're persistent and they keep going, I'm sure they will rise up. The advice that I can give is that please keep going, please continue. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tabin. Sri Lanka has a question as well.
Yeah, first of all, I must thank all the panelists for sharing your valuable thoughts with us. Those were very insightful. My question is to Simon. Simon, in your speech, you just mentioned the regulatory procedures done by the government on CMOs. So I'd like to ask, what are the regulatory procedures should be done by a government when regulating a CMO? That is the first question. The second one, how should the legislation statute be set up to facilitate the CMO?
Okay, if there's anything you take away from this, is just that there's no one size fits all, but there are some basic principles and practices that can be adhered to. Good examples are, for example, WIPO has a CMO toolkit that talks about the good practices a CMO can put in place. For IFPI, we have a code of conduct as well for our CMOs that operate in the sound recording, the music recording sphere. I think what you want to learn really is how to learn from others, but understand how your situation in your country is different from the other country. And for me, the basic principle for regulation is how is the CMO going to be supervised in terms of governance, in terms of transparency, but yet allow market forces to still continue to operate so that it collects effectively, it collects and distributes effectively. So the fear with over-regulation is the regulatory authorities may be getting into an area where they have no market experience. So allow the CMO to operate, have a overview or oversight in terms of transparency and governance issues. If there are any disputes, there can, for example, over tariffs, there can be an administrative body like a copyright tribunal that can settle the dispute between the users and the CMO. So where possible, a light touch approach, but a sensible one that allows the system to operate as efficiently as possible.
All right, are there any more questions on my left-hand side? Oh, we have one. There we go.
Yes, my question is to Dabin. Yes, I'm not sure you are as an independent artist, right?
So what do you exactly mean when you say independent?
Meaning you working by yourself.
Yes, I do it myself, so in that sense I am indeed independent.
Okay, my question is to, I want to know how you manage your work regarding to document and your content.
So first of all, I do work on my own. So I'm always making an effort to set up some sort of a system, but every day I'm making a great effort all the time. Nonetheless, I was able to create a variety of different contents up until now, and I was able to express that through various platforms and channels. But I do work on my own, and sometimes I really have to work hard all the time.
Alrighty. If we don't have any more questions, I believe we are going to. Oh, last question for St. Lucia, on my right-hand side, came up here. This will be our last question for the session.
Okay. Hi, good morning. I just have a question for smaller countries like St. Lucia with certain limitations in terms of capacity and raising awareness. Who do you suggest, well, anybody from the panel could answer, what would you suggest is the easiest and bona fide way to raise awareness so musicians and creators alike could secure their rights?
Aki, I think I'm going to put you on the spot here. You can wrap us up. Would you like to answer?
So
it's a difficult question to answer in one go. Raising awareness could be many different things. You could have a general population, and you could also have the awareness or the perception of the leaders and the politicians, of the people who govern the country. But I think the latter is also quite important. The power of culture, I think, has to be felt and shared. In the beginning, Derek had talked about how Koreans were mistaken for Chinese, and later on people came to know more about Korea and interested in Korean. So you had Hyundai and Hyundai, all these Korean companies, but in the end, in a very short period of time, it was actually K-pop and K-culture that had actually changed the perception of Korea around the world. So that was a power of culture. So that power of culture has to be realized and accepted by the leaders. We all are interested in new things. Especially for smaller islands, and there are many indigenous people. There are many new fascinating things, and making that known to the world, I think, will really contribute to that country. And it's the leaders who have to realize that. CSAC's president, I can't remember the name. What's his name? The president of CSAC? From ABBA? Björn, that's the name. Sorry, couldn't remember that name. Yeah, I'm getting old. Anyway, he was leader of ABBA, and Sweden has Volvo and many other kind of products, but the biggest revenue earner for Sweden for a long period of time was actually Björn or ABBA, and they were earning more than an automaker. So if you realize that, then we can see that the change of perception can really do a lot. And putting that perception into action is also possible. Then I think everything will follow. And thanks to you, who is willing to travel all the way to Korea, that we are now having this kind of discussion. I'm sure you'll also be able to contribute to your country. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, though.
Thank you. You did.
I think Thomas, last remark here. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Well, this is a good question, and a very simple answer would be get organized. There is no other way. If you want more rights, you need to be able to fight for your right. And as my friend Simon said, well, the market is the market, so you need to have more weight to act on the market and to make sure that you have better regulation. And it goes with IP issues, but it also goes with live performance. Performance is the bulk of artist remuneration, and you need also to be organized to convince the employers, to convince the government to raise the salaries or the wages that is given to musicians, and what we know is that now the money they can make out of live performance is going down slowly, but very, very steadily. So it is very, very important to be organized and to otherwise it's just a Wild West, and because musicians are the weakest part, if they cannot introduce regulation, then they will be the loser if they don't be organized.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you everyone for your questions. Please feel free to come up afterward and ask questions, but this is going to be it for our live chat on music here today from the Republic of Korea. We want to thank you so much for coming from your respective countries and joining us. We also want to thank our online audience for joining as well. Next month, we will be traveling to Malaysia, and then to the Maldives, and then to Bhutan. So this is one of many live chats coming in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you here next month. Thank you very much.